What starts with E and ends with class? We'll find out this week on Motoring 2003.
TSN's Motoring 2003 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil, oils fine-tuned for different engines, and Midas, Total Car Care. We do that.
Now let's be honest, all of us every now and then like to see how the other half is living. I mean, check out all the magazines and TV programs on high society, everything from fashion, homes, decorating, and even the food they eat. Well, you know, that's one of the nice things about working on Motoring. We try and bring you a good cross-section of vehicles of all price ranges, but that usually includes some pretty high-priced talent. And I think one of the highlights this year has been the Mercedes SL55 at a cool price of $165,000. But you know, Mercedes wants everybody to know that they've got vehicles half that price, bargain prices. So this week we find ourselves in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as Mercedes introduces the new E-Class, as well as a car they're dubbing the grown-up CLK.
Well, it's nice to have a car that's as nice as this, and the E-Class is the real bread and butter for Mercedes-Benz. It's the more affordable sedan compared to the big S-Class, and it dates back to the old 300 series, which people are familiar with. It's really the #1 selling Mercedes car, and it's a little bit more appropriately sized for what people want in the North American market, not quite as small as the C-Class.
Mercedes-Benz is in expansion mode. Things are going very well. Our growth has been phenomenal in the last 5 years, I would say. I started with this company 13 years ago. We were selling 3,000 vehicles. We're going to sell 14,000 this year. Year to date, at the end of August, we're up 31%. So things are going quite well. Our demographics are becoming younger. We have a car that starts at $34,000, so it's appealing to a much younger segment. The range is very broad, so we go from $34,000 to about $200,000. The new generation E-Class 2003 is available in 2 models, 2 engines, the 3.2 and the E320, and we have a new engine, a new V8 5-liter, which is replacing its predecessor, which was 4.3 liters. It has 302 horsepower. It's a very impressive vehicle. The CLK segment, well, first of all, 2 cars, same engines as the E-Class, the 320, the CLK 320 with a 3.2 liter engine, which delivers 215 horsepower. And then we have also the CLK 500, which has the new engine, the new 5-liter, which replaces the previous 4.3 liter that was in the previous generation. It's a 2-door coupe, so it appeals to a different kind of consumer, naturally. People who are very interested in technology, but also design. The car is beautiful. It has pillarless, it doesn't have a B-pillar. So the lines are very fluid, very elegant. The car also has tremendous power.
Daimler Chrysler has got a lot of interesting things up their sleeves right now. And there seems to be 2 distinct directions they're taking, and both of them are going to be positives for the buying public. Number one, you'll see them increase their line of Mercedes-Benz products with exclusive platforms, okay? But on the other hand, you will see some component sharing where it makes sense. Well, it affects the consumer because instead of, say, a pool of 10 engineers that are really top flight, working on different things like powertrain, electronics and stuff, man, now you got 200 top flight engineers, and they all get together and they trade secrets. So the consumer benefits from a I guess, a much deeper automotive gene pool, I guess, if you want to use the expression.
The 500 engine, it's got power to burn. So when you stomp on it, boy, it just takes up, gets up and go, it flies. It's really nice. The car has lots of little refinements throughout it. CLK is a neat little machine. It's not entirely all based on the E-Class, but nonetheless, you've got the motors from it. It is sort of a mid-size vehicle. And it's stylish as all hell. Driving it around Nova Scotia over the last few days, it turns heads.
Really nice to see another hardtop finally. The coupe with all the windows down, the pillarless coupe. Never lost my taste for those. Quiet, typical German engineering, solid, reliable, works well, makes sense, perfectly functional, and it looks good at the same time.
When you've got a vehicle as good as the Mercedes-Benz E-Class and the CLK, it is hard sometimes to find something wrong with them. So sometimes you have to quibble about what seems to be a minor detail. But it shows that when they've got a good solid product like this and they keep making improvements to it, it just keeps getting better and better and better. You gotta love it, especially when you get to drive cars you can't otherwise afford.
But it comes at a price.
Oh, sure. Hey, as my sister would tell you, everything in the world has a price tag.
You know, when Kia launched the Sportage, it was more like a toe punt than it was a precise strike. This week on Test Drive, we take a look at the all-new Sorento, a vehicle they hope to put right between the pipes. Before getting stuck into the Sorento, it's time for a brief legal notice. Any resemblance between the subject of this test drive and the Acura MDX is purely coincidental. All kidding aside, the Sorento does have more than a passing resemblance to the Acura, the jeweled head and tail lights adding a sophisticated finishing touch. Looking back at the Sportage test drive reminded me just how bad cars once were. Thankfully, the Sorento is as far removed from the Sportage as possible in all except the basic part-time four-wheel drive system. Here it pays to upgrade to either the EX or Luxury EX model tested, as this brings a better full-time four-wheel drive system, one that essentially operates as a rear driver until the wheels slip, at which point the power is relayed forward without driver intervention. The speed and sensitivity does mean a small and noticeable lag, but it's nothing to get worked up over. Under normal circumstances, you drive the Sorento in its automatic 4x4 setting. However, if you want to go off-road, select neutral, flick that to low, you now have access to the low-range gear set and you're ready to go off-roading. Power comes from a 3.5-litre double overhead cam V6 that delivers 195 horsepower and a useful 218 pounds-feet of torque at a suitably low 3,500 RPM. Generally, the work ethic is lively, with the Sorento pulling strongly from rest and on up through the mid-range. At the top end, it begins to get a little breathless and a tad noisy. Mind you, neither gets to the point of being annoying. The electronically controlled 4-speed automatic helps matters enormously here, as it kicks down to a lower gear when needed and has a decent set of evenly spaced ratios. This combination is also good enough to tow 5,000 pounds. When you slip behind the wheel of the Sorento, you find a very pleasant surprise. First of all, you get all the power amenities: locks, windows, mirrors, cruise control, power seats, a great sounding radio, an efficient climate control system. Also, you find good fit and finish, and the materials, well, they're absolutely top notch. There is one exception, and it's this ugly fake wood. In fact, it's bad enough it gives fake wood a bad name. If it was up to me, I would replace the wood with this really nice brushed aluminum trim. Put leather all the way around the steering wheel, replace this with that nice brushed trim, and well, you'd end up with a very neat package. The Sorento rides on a full ladder frame, double wishbone front suspension and a multi-link rear design. Generally, the handling is as expected. Certainly there is a degree of understeer and body roll, but considering the centre of gravity, the Sorento proved to be remarkably predictable through the pylons, especially given the adverse conditions. Likewise, the four-wheel drive system is fast enough to react that the rear end does not want to oversteer needlessly. Climb into the rear of the Sorento and it's pretty much more of the same. There's plenty of room under the front seat for your toes, abundant leg room and plenty of headroom. Indeed, there's almost enough room in the back seat to accommodate 3 adults abreast. And when you come around back, well, there's more surprises. You get a privacy cover to keep prying eyes off your stuff, 70/30 split folding rear seats, which gives you a ton of luggage space. You also get some additional storage space under the floor because the spare tyre, well, it sits underneath here behind the rear valance, and yes, it is a full-size spare with a proper rim, which is a good thing. The only thing you've got to watch, if you do go playing in the mud as we have, just make sure you keep your pants off the back bumper when you're reaching for stuff inside. As for comfort, the Sorento is pretty good on the highway. Around town, however, sharp bumps filter back to the passengers, which is a pity. It's almost as though it needs softer springs for the bumps and firmer damping to control the ensuing body movement. Stopping power comes from a decent set of four-wheel discs and an anti-lock system. The pedal feel is firm and the ABS stays at arm's length, and this again in spite of the slippery surface. You know, when compared to the Sportage, this Sorento has to be considered a quantum improvement. It's got a half-decent all-wheel drive system that includes a low range, it's got plenty of room, it's comfortable, and the handling, well, it's balanced. Best of all, however, it has to be considered somewhat of a bargain, because fully loaded to the gunnels, this thing tops out at a little over 35 grand.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns your spare tire. You know that saying, out of sight, out of mind? Well, that really applies to your spare tire. And this car is a perfect example. When we lifted up the parcel shelf in the back, we found about 5 inches of rusty rainwater in the back of this spare tire well. Now, the spare tire survived being submerged, but the jack that lifts the car, which is underneath the tire, was completely seized. And if it had been required for a roadside installation of the spare tire, it would have been useless. So I strongly suggest that at least once a year you do a dry run in your driveway. Get out the owner's manual, solidly apply the emergency brake, make sure the vehicle's as level as it can be, and do the tire installation procedure and familiarize yourself with everything that's required so that you'll be able to do it quickly and efficiently if you have to do it on the road. You don't want to waste any time because you're somewhat vulnerable. Also, you'll run into all kinds of problems when you do this dry run with many cars. You'll find out that the hex size of the wheel nuts may have been changed over the years, and the wrench that's fitted with the car won't always fit. A 4-way wheel wrench with 4 different sizes will always remedy that problem. You'll find things like this seized jack. Maybe the tire is underinflated or flat. If it's a full-size tire, it'll carry the same inflation pressure as the 4 tires on the car, usually 30 to 35 psi. But if it's a space saver, one of those skinny tires, it calls for 60 psi, and you need that 60 psi to carry the weight of the car. Make sure you check that pressure at least once a year or before you embark on a long road trip. That's your Midas tip of the week.
What am I doing out here? I'll tell you later on Kensi's Corner.
Well, the Maybach, way back in the sort of 30s, Wilhelm Maybach was making cars, and it's from there that the car's named. And when the new Maybach arrives, it's going to make quite an impact, because not the least of which is its price tag. It's anticipated right now probably around $575,000, which is alarming when you consider that Rolls-Royce, which was the world's benchmark, barely chipped over $350,000, so it's considerably more expensive. As for the model coming, there's two wheelbases, a long one and a very long one. The very long one being the 62, which will also get aircraft-style rear seats. And the option list, well, it just goes on and on and on. The most impressive part is that in spite of its almost 6,000 pounds when you throw the driver in, it'll still hustle to 100 kilometers an hour in 5.5 seconds thanks to a 550 horsepower V12 engine, twin turbos to boot.
Now, Mercedes, of course, is not the kind of vehicle you're going to find our Bill Gardner in. As we all know, Bill is strictly a pickup kind of guy. But you know what? There's a rumor out that Bill has been doing a little shopping lately, and he's been shopping for a car. So let's head to the Quaker State garage and see what he found.
Well, Brad, I just bought a 1988 Pontiac with 200,000 kilometers on it, and the fellow that I bought the car from was nice enough to provide me with all the service records from the car. You can see there's just an absolute stack of invoices here. So I went through them. It was quite an education to find out all the parts that had been repaired and what other people charge. And it kind of reminded me of the fact that I'm really lucky to be able to do all my own maintenance and repairs on cars. Over the years, I never would have been able to afford all the nice cars that I've had if I'd had to pay somebody full pop to service them and repair them. In any case, when I went through here, I saw umpteen invoices for tune-ups, spark plugs, air filters, all kinds of oil changes. This car had lots of maintenance. It was neat as a pin when I bought it. Quite a well-maintained car. But one thing I didn't notice in all these invoices was that it had ever had a fuel filter or gas filter replaced. So I got underneath the car, and sure enough, the original fuel filter was still on this car. Now, it's coming up on 15 years old, and that's way too long for a fuel filter to be under there. So I checked the fuel pressure on this car. The car was a little bit difficult to start at times. Especially first start of the day, it took an awful lot of cranking. Checked the fuel pressure, and sure enough, the fuel pressure was a little on the low side. Got underneath, and I replaced the fuel filter, and right away the starting improved on the car. So we took a hacksaw and cut this fuel filter apart to see what was inside it, seeing it was the original fuel filter, and you can see how they're made. They're a metal canister. Remember, these cars have 36 to 42 psi of fuel pressure, so it's got to be a pretty robust filter canister to withstand that pressure. You can see the filter media here, which is normally, when it's in good condition, sort of a beige color. It's absolutely black and completely plugged up with dirt. So this filter did its job. It prevented dirt from coming out of the tank and getting up to the fuel injectors in the engine where it could have done some damage. I think the reason these filters get overlooked when people are maintaining the car is it's an awful messy, dirty, thankless job to do. And in many cases it can be quite dangerous. Remember, you've got all this fuel pressure trapped in the fuel lines. So when we change these filters, we unplug the fuel pump and restart the engine to kill the fuel pressure. We try to run the car as low on fuel as we can before we change it, and we also crack the gas cap loose. You've probably noticed that when you crack the gas cap loose, quite often you can hear a little bit of pressure hissing out of the cap. There's a bit of residual pressure in the tank. Now, on a modern car with fuel injection, the filter's underneath the car, so you're standing underneath the hoist trying to change it, and even when you've done all those things I mentioned, you still have a lot of fuel that's pouring down on you. It's a messy job, and I think a lot of guys avoid doing it, and they just put it off forever. And in the case of this car, it had never been changed. So you've got to strike a sort of happy medium between the filter manufacturers who want you to change this thing once a year regardless of fuel mileage, and this car that I bought where it had never been changed. I think probably if you changed it every 50,000 kilometers, that would be a good idea. And if there's an advice other than that in your owner's manual, by all means follow that and get the fuel filter changed occasionally. This particular one is just under $20. Some cars are $40 to $50 for the filter. Do not try to do it yourself. As I mentioned, that fuel pressure and the proximity of the exhaust system are safety factors why you don't want to be trying to do this yourself. You've got to know the procedure to do it safely. Have a pro do it and do it on a regular basis. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2003.
you ever stood at the side of a freeway? Man, it's scary. Cars and trucks whipping by here at 1,000,000 miles an hour. This is a lot closer than I want to be. And yet every day on this highway, and this is one of the busiest roads in the entire world, a police officer is standing not here, but on the shoulder of the passing lane, jumping out in front of traffic, flagging them down because their buddies caught them on radar a few bits up the road. What are they, crazy? Every year, some poor police officer buys the farm because his butt gets stuck out in the wrong lane and he gets whacked. What, for what? Getting somebody for going 20K over the limit? Listen, if you're going 20K over the limit on this highway, you're barely keeping up. You're not causing any danger. What is causing the danger is the police officer. You're driving along, you see a bunch of cops in the center lane, you hammer on your brakes so you don't get nailed, you cause a 12-car pileup up the road. This is safety? I don't think so. Now, I've spoken to police officers, they hate this detail. I've spoken to the management of police officers, they hate exposing their officers to this kind of danger. So who's telling them to do this? It's crazy. What they need is intelligent speed limits to begin with and more intelligent enforcement of those speed limits. Oh, by the way, this whole program is one of the other reasons you should be driving in the right lane. The cops are always looking for speeders in the left lane. I'm Jim Kensi.
Now, as we've seen this week, Mercedes continues to make some nice cars, including that new E-Class. And although a lot of us can't afford to buy one, wouldn't it be nice just to get the keys to a vehicle like that for a day? Well, you can. I'll tell you how. Check out our webpage at motoringtv.com or click in tsn.ca. And there you'll find our selections for our upcoming Car of the Year special. Now, you can make your selection, and whoever comes closest to agreeing with us could win a day at next year's AJAC Test Fest in Shannonville, Ontario. And every key to every new model will be at your disposal. So check out that webpage. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
We operate in 150 countries. We sell close to 2 million vehicles worldwide. And we're finally coming into Canada. Nobody has ever come into this country from day one with 7 models. So that's one of our advantages. We should have been here a long time ago, but we're finally here and we're very excited.
TSN's Motoring 2003 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil. Oils fine-tuned for different engines. And Midas, Total Car Care. We do that.